Okay, then hello everyone to this Orchestrator weekly call. Again, Nas here. And we have, okay, let's start with the state of Ceph ADM right now. So we were really affected by the Sepia long-running cluster mishap that happened last week, which means that I really couldn't get any pull request merged. The container registries were builds failed, and I hope as of today things will start working again. Let's see how the next QA runs are going to be. Tim Sarang is working on adopting daemons and found an issue where if you adopt a gateway daemon, it's going to be immediately removed by Ceph ADM because it's it seems to be an orphaned daemon without a server specification and was instantly removed. So if you actually do want to properly adopt existing gateway daemons, then we have to provide a way to get this done in a safe way. So the idea is to provide a way to build up a template containing the server specifications that are known to the orchestrator, and then print them out and let the user apply it. I think that's a good way of doing things. It's somewhat optional for the official documentation. If you really want to have a clean state, then you can always redeploy gateway daemons. It's just another way of doing things, I think. So, and yeah, I actually think that we can talk about the YAML-based communication with Ceph ADM. So there is a problem that if there are two ways to communicate with Ceph ADM, and one is the CLI. Ceph orch apply mon and then a server specification, or Ceph orch apply RGW, or Ceph orch apply MDS, for example, and that's error prone. At least that's my experience, that it's error prone. And there are two reasons for that. One is that we have to it turns out that if you forget a parameter and you're using parameter by positions, then it's not trivial to actually detect that and make sure we're getting an error. And in general, users will just screw up their server specification and will then have a hard time recovering from that again. The other reason is that the apply command turned out to be actually not easy to understand. That you apply a new complete placement specification instead of adding new hosts or adding new placements. And yeah, by encouraging users to use a YAML-based communication with Ceph ADM, I think we are much better from a user experience point of view. And just by coincidence, that's exactly how Kubernetes is doing things. Any thoughts?
Just a follow-up.
Yeah.
So somebody approached me and asked if there are any safeguards in apply. Because, I mean, this is somehow connected to that topic. So people are usually not really they're not kind of comfortable when messing with the cluster, and he asked if we have some kind of safeguard to Orch apply so that he wouldn't destroy his cluster because he doesn't know what he's doing. I said no. And technically you can't destroy your cluster because we only scale to one instance and you cannot remove an entire service. And you also cannot remove OSDs, but still you could scale your monitors down and you can scale your gateways down to one, which would possibly cut connections and also possibly create a bottleneck. So yeah, I'm not sure what I should think about this because there are a lot of, I mean, he used this dash, are you do you really want to do this kind of thing that Ceph introduces all over the place? And I'm not sure if we should follow that one because I kind of find it stupid. Yeah. So thoughts?
I mean, how is Kubernetes dealing with that stuff, right? You just have simply the possibility to scale your cluster down to one instance. There is also no real safeguard against it.
Yeah, I tend to be on your side. So I guess, I mean, we can get very sophisticated and say if a certain amount of services, which represents a certain percentage of the services that you're running in the cluster, are changing, then we could say, well, you know, well, is that really what you want to do? And then if yes, pass a flag or whatever. But I mean, as a default behavior, I don't think we should do that. I just wanted it to raise.
I would generally argue for most services that are stateless, this is fairly harmless. So if you accidentally scale down NFS, you could always scale it back up. Where we may want to think about this is anywhere that you could lose data. So maybe there should be a minimum threshold on a MOM, and there should be a confirmation for that. So you go less than 3.
Yeah, but even for gateways, you could definitely not lose data. But if you have a high load on your cluster and you have a lot of different connections, removing a gateway will drop connections and will definitely introduce bottlenecks, performance issues, whatever. So, I mean, it's not a huge problem, right? But that's.
But in that case, it's a service outage instead of data loss.
Yeah.
But in the case of data loss, I think that there might be an argument for something like that.
True.
Yeah, especially regarding the monset, I think that's a good argument. Right now we prevent the scale below 1. Maybe we should take the number of hosts into account and then prevent the scale to at least, or to prevent the scale below 3 if you have at least 3 hosts available. I think that does make sense.
Well, no, I agree with that, Sebastian. I think that we shouldn't take decisions by the final user. Okay, so if the final user wants to have only one monitor, it's something that the final user will be able to do. I think. Okay, we can warn. We can add a parameter in order to, well, are you really sure that you want to do this? Okay. But I think that in any case, we should take decisions by the final user because we do not know what is the lab, the situation where the final user is going to deploy the cluster, or what he's trying to do with the cluster. Okay, so I think that to take decisions requires a lot of information about the cluster in order to do the right thing. Okay, so maybe well, I think that it's good to have warnings, but not to avoid, for example, to have less than 3 monitors. Okay, this is the more healthy status. But why? What if I want to mount a Ceph cluster only with one server?
So I tend to agree. So it must be possible for a user to scale down to one monitor, even though that's really going to be an edge case, at least for non-trivial clusters. But on the other hand, I think it does make sense to warn users and make sure they really know what they're doing if they scale critical servers below.
Agree about warning and about to ask if they are really sure about that. Okay, but not about avoid or limiting or ban any kind of configuration.
I think we don't have a disagreement here. Oh, we have an agreement here.
Okay, so more thoughts on that?
I don't think so.
Okay, so then I have one more thing. So I get increasing concerns and questions about the behavior of the OSD deployment. So people do not expect that disks are being automatically deployed when they're added to the cluster. So they expect that the OSD specs are kind of sort of unmanaged, which is, I don't know if this comes down to educating the user or if it is just uncommon or just unexpected or is just due to the lack of documentation. Because I think it is fine as long as you kind of understand what will happen. So if you're not caught off guard, because the nice thing about having automated deployment is that you just specify your OSD spec once. Everything is declarative. And if you add a new disk to your cluster, to one of the nodes, then this will just be added to the cluster because this is probably what you wanted. So my question is just, should we default this to somehow unmanaged or so after the first deployment, or if it is just a lack in perception and we should document this better?
So my take on this would be to make sure users are not going to be surprised for it. But I really like the way of deploying OSDs automatically. Also, one argument is because Rook does it, right? And and it works well for Rook.
Yeah, I will say I will also tend to saying we should keep the current behavior of automatically deploying things, but explicitly telling this in the documentation, having sentences like, this will be automatically pick up anything that matches the specified filter in the specs. And if you do not want to have this, there is this unmanaged flag that prevents the spec from automatically placed or deployed or whatever.
I'll create a docs ticket so that we make sure to put this in the docs more explicitly than it is now.
Cool.
Sounds good. Any more thoughts on that topic?
So when we're talking about documentation,
What's the deployment behavior?
not that.
I mean, we have a kind of similar behavior, right? If you zap a disk, it's automatically added back to the cluster, which is kind of similar to the state when you just add a new disk to the cluster itself. What about zapping? Joshua, should we prevent the automatic re-addition to the cluster if we use a zapped disk?
I do have a tracker issue that let me try to find it, that speaks about the possibility to use Ceph volume to blacklist a device, or blocklist, sorry. So that, I mean, it's not implemented, but using Ceph volume to specify LVM tags or whatever mechanism to tag certain disks so that they won't be picked up is maybe a good idea. And that could just be attached to the zap command. So after the disk is zapped, you could automatically add it to a list of, unwanted disks. And this could also be helpful for users that want to, that they already know that a certain disk should not be added to the cluster, and for whatever reason they can't exclude it in the drive spec, so in the OSD spec. And maybe that will solve some problems, but this is not implemented and probably needs more thought. Currently, the workaround is that you just mount the disk or create a file system on it or do similar things. Yeah, I guess that we'll get the request once Ceph ADM is a bit more used, but for now, I don't think this is very important.
Okay. Any more thoughts on the topic? Okay, Jomi.
Okay. Well, just to comment a couple of things, and well, this surprisingly it's a little bit surprise for me because it seems that everything is related. Okay. And it starts with the concept that we have about Ceph ADM, okay? And well, what is Ceph ADM? Is just an installing tool, or is a tool that is going to manage completely a cluster? What do you think, Sebastian?
Definitely an enterprise-ready tool to manage a cluster.
Okay. So we are going we're trying to do this kind of thing, but in this moment, what we are trying to do is just to stabilize a tool to install clusters, okay? Because I think that in order to manage a Ceph cluster, we need, to include more intelligence and more knowledge about the environment in the Ceph ADM tool. And I think that, we are working in that, but it is not in this moment in the tool, okay? So I think that probably we are having problems because this situation, okay? For example, the example about adding OSDs, we are working in a declarative way, okay? We have a installer tool that tries to work in a declarative way. And probably final users are not understanding this because they understand that with Ceph ADM, they are going to install a cluster, not to manage a running cluster and to solve situations in a running cluster. So, well, I think that we need to work more in this line. But apart of that, another thing that I think that we really need is the templates for the different services, or to have a good description of what is a service and to create the service using this kind of files. For example, for monitoring, okay, you can define the monitoring service with more or less the spec file that we are using in this moment, okay? And I think that this, is probably that we avoid a lot of problems if we are using a template that we can check syntactically and semantically if it has sense or not has sense about the monitoring service, not just deploying one daemon with one monitor. And also in relation with this, we have the thing about to modify and to change settings automatically because we want to have a declarative working behavior of Ceph ADM, and we are checking the situation. We do not have enough information about the cluster, about the resources that are free, about the preferences of the user, and we are doing things like changing settings. This is the main point in my comment, okay? And this related with one of example in code that is put in the path. And I think that until we have this intelligence included inside Ceph ADM about how to manage in a proper way the cluster, we should avoid to make this kind of modifications. Okay, so in the case, for example, this example, this is a setting that is called config dashboard. Config dashboard. Why? What is going to config automatically? If I use.
Is it just me or is Miguel?
No, I am talking about a lot of things. Okay, so I think that summarizing, I think that we should avoid to change any setting in Ceph ADM main loop. Okay, in the reconciliation loop of Ceph ADM, because we do not have enough information in this moment about the cluster for doing this kind of things. What I'm suggesting is to work in the spec files in order to include more settings, more attributes, and this is the first step in order to understand what are the final user preferences and what we can do to keep or to maintain these user preferences. And this is all. Maybe it's just a little bit metaphysical or just conceptual, but I think that we are trying to mix a lot of things together and without any plan. I think that this will cause problems.
It's hard to get the gist out of it. So one thing is clear, I think, and that's the schedule of Ceph ADM is very basic, and it's on the edge of being a bit too simple to be of any use, right? So we don't have any resource-aware scheduling. We don't even prevent port conflicts, right? That's so the scheduler that we do have, it works, but it's extremely simple. But that is independent, in my opinion, that's independent of if Ceph ADM itself is actually capable of being a deployment tool versus being an install tool. Right? Because Ceph ADM itself is based on day 2 operation and not on day 1 operation. So you can, if you restrict yourself to be independent of the scheduler lacking features like resource-aware scheduling, like for example, if you know that you have dedicated hosts for specific services or daemons, then I think Ceph ADM is already pretty well suited for being a real deployment tool. And I think it's especially when it comes to providing proper defaults for other components like the dashboard. I think Ceph ADM is certainly capable of providing these kind of proper defaults. But
completely agree.
Especially when it comes to especially when it comes to the Grafana host name, it's something where the user needs to be able to override dashboard settings.
Yeah.
But I think it's independent of calling Ceph ADM just an install tool.
Yes. Well, I think that we can we can do a lot of things, okay, and in the future it could be something really awesome, okay, with a lot of functionality about managing Ceph cluster with artificial intelligence and a lot of things included, okay. That is possible, and that is the future, okay. What I'm saying is that maybe in this situation, and taking into account that we are going to replace production elements like DeepC or, for example, Ansible, we are going to replace these tools tested in production with something that is new, okay, and taking into account that the stabilization of the system just with the functionality for installing, well, I think that we have a lot of work to do. I think that maybe we should focus on this first step to deploy a Ceph cluster and try to deploy a Ceph cluster in the best condition possible, to use the preferences of the final user in order to install the cluster, and to do this in the perfect, okay? I think that it can be better, too much better, okay? Better than for example, Ceph Ansible or DeepC. I think that is more easy to work with Ceph ADM and more quick, and it has a lot of advantages, okay? And if we think in upgrades, well, the difference is big. So what I'm saying is just to focus in the first thing, that is to deploy a cluster and trying to do this in the best way possible. And for that, what I think is that we need a clear definition of spec files for each of the services that we have in Ceph. And a part of that, we should avoid any kind of change in configuration. We should provide default settings when we are deploying a new daemon or a new service. This is clear, okay? But if the user can provide us some kind of a specification, we should use this specification, and we should use the specification provided by the user in order to maintain the state, not to think that the default settings that we are calculating are the good ones. Okay, is that what I am saying?
I tend to disagree. I tend to disagree. I mean, for example, we know which Ganesha options we are writing. So we know how things are looking, and thus we can actually provide some good default, especially for the dashboard, for example, right?
Okay, perfect to provide the defaults, okay? But then what we are doing, for example, with this setting, Grafana URL, is just changing the setting that the user decides that is the good one with the default one, because we think that we know more than the final user. I think that this is not correct.
Yeah, especially for the Grafana URL, we know that we will never be able to provide the perfect setting, because we just don't know which common name is part of the certificate that the user needs.
Yes, so there is no problem in using the default when you are deploying the service, but do not change this default. Okay, do not change again to the default if the user wants to use another different setting. Is what I am saying. With this setting and with all the settings, we can use defaults when we are deploying daemons or services. That is okay. It's perfect. I think that it is the best way to do, because we avoid to ask a lot of things to the final user. But if we have deployed the service or the daemon and the user decides to change one setting, I think that we are not in the position to think that our default setting is best than the one provided by the final user.
I don't agreement here as well. I think we're talking a bit past each other, and I think we are on the same side here. And especially regarding the Grafana URL, my pull request originally was to just provide a good default instead of overwriting the setting.
But well, in this case, I think that it's easy for Grafana and for every daemon. What I'm saying is just to deploy new daemons using the default settings or the settings that you think that are the best. Okay. This is okay. This is perfect. But if after that the user decides to change one setting, we can revert the decision of the user automatically.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we are on the same page now.
Yes,
okay.
We are on the same page. We don't disagree here. It's just
okay.
we're talking past each other.
So we should remove from the reconciliation loop or main loop in Ceph ADM this kind of things to check what is the difference with the default setting, and if the things are not equal, then change by the default setting.
Let's move that technical detail into a different audience.
Okay.
Because how exactly we're going to implement this, I don't think we need to come to a conclusion here.
Okay, but the important is the concept, and the concept is that we are not more clever than the final user.
Yes, exactly. We are never going to be more clever than the final user.
Perfect. Completely agree.
Okay. Next topic. Workloads in tautology. Who added that?
So I added that Yuri wanted to discuss this a bit today since we've been making good progress on the upgrade suite for Ceph ADM. And it's working well for upgrading Octopus to master now using simple workloads like Rados and RBD. And earlier we were running into some issues with like CephFS or RTW setups, tautology. So we were wondering, is now the time to try those? Are there more fixes needed or any other known bugs?
CephFS test runner should work. RGW is part of the Ceph ADM tautology task. RGW, I think no one really tested it with Ceph ADM.
This is at least that like I keep in mind that we can actually add right away. Do you see anything that would not work?
There are no known issues.
Okay. But I thought that RGW still.
No, it's been merged and it works.
Okay.
iSCSI is still ongoing. So if we have existing iSCSI tests, which I have doubted, that's going to be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, we don't have iSCSI coverage for upgrades today, so that's already an existing hole.
Yeah, would be great to have this pull request merged. Yeah.
We're waiting for what do we call it? Key registry set up, and we'll give it a full run. See what happens.
Yeah, but in general, everything should work except iSCSI. And if we encounter a bug, then it's something new.
Okay, copy.
Having more test coverage really, having new bug reports really would be helpful. And see if things work or not.
Will do.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're also looking at expanding the use of it in the Rados suite now, so we'll see if anything pops up there.
That would be really awesome. I saw a pull request. Trying out the Rados suite. 5 days ago. That was this pull request here.
Yeah, exactly. I think we just got stuck with the key server going down last week. So as that's getting back set up again, we should be able to make more progress.
Yeah, I really hope that the build failures and tautology failures that we saw last week are gone.
Yeah, it seems like there may still be some lingering issues as we discover more places where we relied on Chakra builds that are no longer present. But David and Kipu have been mopping them up as they come.
One thing indeed might be different is that the fixed 2 cluster we have a different fixed 2 cluster in Ceph ADM compared to the Ceph to the overall fixed 2 cluster. So we have this fixed 2 cluster and this overall Bix2 clusters, and they're not the same. So I don't know if they are really interchangeable.
Trying to see what the difference is here.
Me neither. But I saw a problem in the trying out the radar suite that there was some problem with setting up the cluster, and my thought was that it was generated by a different cluster setup.
The only difference I'm seeing is the lack of client.rgw and alert manager in the general one.
But that shouldn't be a big issue.
No, it shouldn't.
Maybe trying it out again and see what happens might actually be useful.
Yep. Yeah, we'll have to run it again this week once the images are all back up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Yuri, any more thoughts on the topic? What's up?
No, thank you.
Okay. So Miguel, labels in
No, it's just to transmit or to communicate one desire from the dashboard team. Okay, this about about things that can affect or can modify behavior in dashboard, or can affect in any way the dashboard. Okay, so if we are doing pull requests and we think that maybe it could be interesting to inform dashboard team about that, well, pues just to use the dashboard label, okay? Because I think that in the Orchestrator group in GitHub, there is people from dashboard, like Ernesto or Alfonso. I think that they are. And this is all. It's just a kindly suggestion.
One topic is, of course, that when doing any changes, we are often interfering with different components. Like, for example, if we modify the deployment of RGWs, then it's somehow related to RGW, right? If we change the deployment of an MDS server, then it's directly also related to CephFS. So I was in the past, I was a bit hesitant to actually add component labels to Ceph pull requests because it just generates a lot of noise if I add them.
Okay, maybe not all the cases, but for example, if you put a config setting like config dashboard, maybe it's interesting just to let it know to the dashboard team. Okay.
Yeah, because it turns out that Kiefer is working in the dashboard team as well. So that pull request was by the dashboard team.
Okay. Okay, it's just well, I think that is not a hard requirement.
Yeah, but thanks for the hint. I will have a look at adding, or we can have a look at adding new tags, new labels to pull requests if necessary. And it's just a question of when we should add them, right? When is the difference between adding too much noise versus showing important information?
Yes,
I don't know. Okay. Any more topics for today? Doesn't seem to be the case. So, thank you for attending, and let's sync up next week.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.